All right. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, you can post them. It should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, to the right of the video if you're on a larger screen. All right. Let's see if we got some questions in there. Looks like we got a couple in there. We got one from TJ. So TJ says, Q, should the lead leg still be bent slightly at impact, or should it already be straight when impact occurs? Typically, it's going to have a little bit of flex in it still, but it's going to be straightening, if that makes sense. So if we're coming down, basically, we're going to flex that leg as we come down, right? So it's going to have some flex in it, and that's going to start to straighten as we come into impact. Typically, at impact with most players, you're going to see it have still some flex in it, but it's straightening. And then when we get into the release of the club, that's typically where you're going to see it straightening more. And then after the release is typically when you see it completely straightening out when you look at most players. There are some players, though, that do have it kind of straightening out almost at impact. So like Brooks Koepka would be one of those. If you look at Brooks Koepka, he's kind of like already got it straightened out right at impact. But with most players, you're going to see some flex in it. But pretty much all players are straightening that leg. So it's not typically straight, but it's straightening into that position. What we don't want to do is hold a flex leg position, because if we do that, then what's going to happen is our legs are going to stall, right? Our hips are going to stall. And then when our hips stall, that's going to tend to make everything release to the ball, right? So if we come in and we're kind of bracing with that lead leg and we don't keep pushing through to push that hip back and around, the body stalls, and then we will typically have a little bit of a scoop at the bottom. So we want to make sure, right, that our leg's still turning through, but there typically will be some flex in it at that time of impact. Good question. All right, let's keep going. Ken L says, Q, when I straighten my lead leg to whip the club through contact, I find I often hit the ball thin or top it. How can I fix that? Hard to say without seeing your swing to know exactly, what's going on there. But generally, when you're hitting it thin or you're topping it, it's because you're not controlling the bottom of your swing very well, right? So if you think about the bottom of the arc of the swing, right? If I'm topping it, that typically means that, well, first of all, if you're topping it, then the bottom of your swing just isn't low enough, right? We need to have the bottom of the swing arc. It needs to be in the ground for shots that we're hitting off the turf. It needs to be into the ground a little bit. It needs to be underneath the golf ball, I should say. That won't technically always be in the ground, right? So if the ball is like sitting up on the grass really nicely, then if there's a bunch of grass underneath the ball, you won't necessarily be getting the bottom of the club, into the ground. But the bottom of this arc needs to be underneath the golf ball a little bit, right? So if you're topping it, that's just not happening. And a lot of times if you're thinning it, that's not happening either. So beyond that, you would want to look at, okay, well, is it too far? It could be too far forward, too far backward either, too, right? So if I'm coming in and let's say the bottom of my swing arc is too far backward, right? Well, I'm coming in, I'm missing the ground, and my club's working up into the golf ball. That can lead to a top or a thin, right? Now, if my low point is too far in front, then the same thing can happen, right? So you have to look at your swing and kind of see, look on yourself on slow motion video and see, okay, am I hanging back too far or am I getting too far forward, right? And see where the bottom of your swing is. And it could also be that you just need to it could be where the bottom of your swing's happening where it needs to be. Like ideally where the bottom of your swing would be in front of the golf ball, a few inches, 3-4 inches, something like that. And then slightly below the golf ball. That would be where you'd want it. That's going to allow you to make ball first contact, take a nice divot, and all those things. So that's basically where you'd want to have it. So if you're looking at your swing on video and you're kind of tracking the club as it's coming down, it's like, hey, the bottom of my swing is 3 inches in front, 4 inches in front of the ball, but I'm topping and you're thinning it, then it means that you're just not you need to get down to the ground. So make a concerted effort to really hit the ground. Don't be afraid to hit the ground. And it could be that you're trying to straighten out your leg, and that's just pushing your body away from the golf ball and making you so what we want to make sure that we're doing is that we're staying in our posture, right? you don't want to just straighten your leg to push your hip up, right? So if you're straightening your leg just to do this, right, then look, my upper body may be moving away. That can make my arc taller, right? What we want to make sure that we're doing is we're straightening the leg, we're pushing the hip back and around, and we're staying in our postures we're working through. So that way we can hit down and through the golf ball. So just some things that I would look at on video. Like I said, it's hard to know for sure, but without seeing your swing, but those would be some things I would look at. All right, let's get going. So Mike M says, I taught myself to play by following Jimmy Ballard. Cool. Thanks for sharing. I don't know what you're looking for, as a response to that. I will say that Clay's not related to Jimmy Ballard, if that's kind of what you're thinking. Not related. It's just a coincidence. I'm guessing somewhere down the road they might be distantly related. I guess that's possible since they share the same last name, but yeah, they're not directly related by from what Clay has told me. All right, let's get going. So Dave B says, does the principle of forward shaftling also apply to bunker shots? So fairway bunker shots where you're basically making a full swing, and trying to, it's really no different than a shot that you would hit out of the fairway, right? The only real difference is that you have to be more precise with where you're hitting the ground, right? It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder shot. I actually saw some data recently that said that if you hit it in a fairway bunker, on average, it adds about 1.4 strokes to your score versus hitting it in the fairway, right? So you definitely want to avoid fairway bunkers as much as you can. But the swing that you make out of there is very much the same as one that you'd make out of the fairway. It's just that your margin for error is much smaller because when you hit out of the fairway, the ball is like on the grass and it's sitting up on the grass, and it's a lot easier to hit, right? When you hit out of a fairway bunker, well, the ball is sitting down, even it may be like not down in the sand, but there's part of the golf ball that it's going to be hard to get to because some of the golf ball is going to be in the sand, right? It's going to be sitting down underneath the top level of the sand. So it makes it harder to make really, really solid contact. You'll tend to chunk it and thin it or top it, a lot of times. So that's why it can add to the score because it's just hard to hit the green. Now the pros make it look easy. That's because they're very good at controlling the bottom of the arc of their swing, but most recreational players are not. Now, as far as a green side bunker is concerned, you can certainly get away with less shaft lean there. A lot of it depends on the shot that you're trying to hit. So if you are trying to hit a shot that's really, really high, right? You're trying to get it really high and the land soft. You're really not going to have much shaft lean. You may have a little bit, right? So that shot may look like this as you're coming through. So you may be kind of contacting, you may be kind of hitting the sand or having the club work underneath the sand and be looking like this, right? Now, if you're trying to hit one that's kind of going to come out lower and run out a little bit, right? Then you would maybe have one that would kind of look like this, where you do have some shaft lean. So, it really depends on what kind of shot you're trying to hit out of a green side bunker. But if you're trying to hit the high one, a less shaft lean can be helpful for a couple of reasons. One, it adds more loft, and two, it exposes more of the bounce, or it can if you do it correctly, right? So that's what we want in the bunkers. We want to use the bounce of the club to help it to glide through the sand. So that would be something that could be beneficial to help you to do that. But yeah, definitely, you don't want to have backward shaft lean. You don't want to be coming and hitting bunker shots like this, right? It's not going to be a very good shot. You're most likely going to hit behind the ball too much and chunk it, right? So we want to have typically, shaft straight up and out or slightly forward for a high one, and then a little bit more forward if we're trying to get it to run out a little bit. So Mike M says, I have tried toss speed, but am getting worse. I feel I should go back to Jimmy Ballard's methods. What would you suggest? Do whatever works best for you. That's what I would suggest. Um, you know, if what we have to understand, I mean, I don't know what you're working on as far as top speed is concerned. We have a lot of things out there, but what we have to understand is that sometimes you if you change the way you're moving a little bit, right? So let's say you're in the stable fluid spine and you're used to having your spine angles kind of go all over the place. So you have a reverse, let's say you got a reverse pivot, and well, you've kind of taught yourself how to swing that way, right? And hit the ball swinging that way. Well, if you go and start having a more stable spine and moving differently, well, you don't know how to move that different way and coordinate hitting the ball yet. So, a lot of times when you change a technique, especially if you've been playing golf for a long time, right? If you've been playing golf for a long time, essentially you've built motor patterns, meaning that you have um, your brain can automatically kind of do movements, right, without much thought, right? So when you go and you change that, and now you have to really think through how you're moving, it makes it more difficult. And a lot of times you hit the ball worse in the beginning. It doesn't mean that what you're doing is wrong. It just means that you don't know how to hit the ball that way yet. So anyway, if you do what works best for you is what I would recommend doing. So if top speed golf system, I'm not going to sit here and claim that the top speed golf system is the best thing for every single golfer. I'm sure there are golfers that try to do it, and it's not the right fit for them. I mean, the top speed golf system is not something that you're just going to try for a little bit and it's going to make you better like that. It's something that you're basically making sure you're doing all the major pieces of the swing that are the most important. You're doing those pieces correctly. So if you're working through the top speed golf system, it's not something that you just try for a week and then, because it's not working, it's a terrible program. It's not like that. It's more, it takes a long time to do the reps and to make a significant difference in your swing. It takes hard work, and not saying that you're not working hard, but just saying like it takes, that sort of thing. So we have a money back, guarantee. So if you, not trying to encourage you to leave or anything like that, but you do what works best for you. But if you decide top speed golf is not for you, we just contact our support team and we'll and request a refund, and we'll be happy to do it. So Chase R says, I'm working through the shallowing fix. I can't believe how well it worked to get the ball moving right to left. I'm noticing that as I've strengthened my grip, I'm really squeezing tight. Will that go away as it begins to feel more natural? Well, I wouldn't squeeze any more tight than you were before. So not sure why you're doing that, why you're strengthening it, why you're gripping it tight. When we say strengthen the grip, we're not saying hold it tighter. You hold it the same, with the same grip pressure that you would normally do. It's just that your hands are oriented on the grip in a different way. So, so yeah, that's not really something that should be happening. I keep the questions coming. We got about 45 minutes left here. All right, got some questions come in. Um, So Tom C says best drill for hitting wedges correctly. Been hitting them thin lately. Yeah. So what I'd recommend doing is working through our Tosby Golf wedge system. We go over the just like the typical setup and technique in there. I wish there was just one drill that just covered everything, thin shots or whatever. But I would just make sure that your setup is good and that you have the proper technique. So if you go and check out our wedge system course, Clay goes over that in the very beginning. So if you want to check that out, you can click the house icon at the top of the page. That will take you to the home page. If you scroll down the home page, you will see a list of all the courses. Select that wedge, the wedge, Topsy Golf wedge system, and check it out. And then in those first couple videos in there, it goes over the technique. So Troy P says, I'm trying to follow the shadowing fix, but I can't seem to hit draw shots. When I do it, I push the ball to the right. So the club face just isn't getting closed enough, right? So what I'd recommend doing is strengthening the grip or strengthening the wrist angles, right? So there's essentially two ways that you want to get the club face more closed, right? If the ball is not turning, if it's not drawing, it's not curving enough, right? Then we need to get the club face more closed. And like I said, there's two ways we want to do that. The first way would be, and this is the easiest way. This is the way that I highly recommend for pretty much all golfers to do. If you're having trouble hitting draws, is to have the hands in a stronger position on the grip. So a weak grip, I would say a weak grip would be like a grip where your thumbs kind of run down the top of the shaft, right? So this would be like a weak grip. You can see, my lead hand here is kind of pointing toward the target. My trail hand would be, the palm of my hand would be pointing toward the target, right? That's what I would call a weak grip. A lot of people have this grip because, in my opinion, it's because it's the most comfortable grip to have at address. So when you're standing when you're in the address position with the ball, right? When it's just the most comfortable position to be in because your hands can be right in front of you, right? It's just the most comfortable position to be in. Unfortunately, it makes it difficult to come into contact in a good way for most players. The reason is that they're going to tend to try to return to this position. Well, this isn't a good impact position, right? Because there's not a lot of shaft lean, and a lot of times the club face will be open as we're coming down, and we'll have to come over the top or really flip the hands to square it up. So a lot of times we don't even come into contact with it. We usually end up kind of like this, right? Because we're trying to get that club face closed because we've opened it up in the backswing, which we should be doing, but we have to close it in a way. So typically when you look, there are players that have there's lots of players on tour that have weak grips, but if you look at their wrist angles, they have very strong wrist angles. So if you Colin Morikawa, for example, if you look at Colin Morikawa, as he gets up to the top of the swing, he's got a lot of bow in his wrist. And then when he comes into contact, he's like this. He has a lot of bow in that lead wrist. Well, that's what he has to do to be able to get his hands in front and to square up the face with that weak grip, right? So that's why I don't recommend that for most golfers, because that's a hard thing to do. It's hard to have a bowed wrist. Now, if that's an easy thing for you, that feels really natural for you to do, great. That's what Colin Morikawa does. It works really, really well. But for most people, it's just not. From what I've seen, recreational golfers are generally going to be better off having a stronger grip where their lead hand is more on top of the grip, the trail hand's more under, right? So that would look more like this. You can see how my thumb is now going more down, more the side of the shaft, right? So if you think of like the top of the shaft where the logo is, if we're thinking of that as 12 o'clock and this is 3 o'clock, my thumb's more at like a 2:30 position. This would be a stronger grip. Well, when I set up to the ball, if I try to put my hands in front like this, like where they were before, it's not very comfortable, which is why I think a lot of people tend to not use this grip. It's actually going to be more comfortable for you to have more of a forward press with the hands in front at address, right? But if I come into contact here, I can have lots of shaft lean in a square club face and look at my wrist, right? My wrist is in a very neutral, comfortable position. So that's why we generally recommend a stronger grip for most players, because it's just going to put you in a better impact position. It's going to allow for better things to happen in your golf swing because you're not going to have to make compensations in your golf swing to get the club face closed. And those compensations that people make are coming down steep. Right? If I have the club face open, I'm going to tend to come down steep and over the top in order to hit a functional shot. Because if I shallowed out the club and swung from the inside with an open face, well, I'm just going to hit the ball. I'm going to hit a big push slice. I'm going to hit it 45 degrees to the right. And your brain says, no, I want to hit the ball that way. So you swing to the left to accommodate that, right? So if we have a stronger grip, I have this club face closed. Well, if I were to come over the top of the closed face, I'm going to hit it 45 degrees left. So my brain says, I want to hit the ball that way. So we shallow it much more easily. You're incentivized to shallow out the club. The other thing is that if I have this face open, I'm going to do something to square it up. And what a lot of people do to square it up is they early release the club. That's a very, very important thing that I don't think a lot of people understand is that releasing the club earlier, right? So coming into contact where we basically don't have any shaft lean. If I get rid of my shaft and get rid of all my lag, that is a way to take the face from open to square, right? It's closing the club face. If I release my lag later, that opens up the club face, right? So I have to have this club face in a stronger position so that way I can keep my lag on there. So that's really, really important to understand. So if I had to guess, you probably have a weak grip. You may also be cupping your wrist, right? So just like I can strengthen my wrist angles, I can weaken them too. If I cup my lead wrist, right, now that club face is open. Now watch, if I have a weak grip and then I also cup my wrist, look at how, I mean, this is be like a crazy open face, but look how open that club face is. I'm going to have a really hard time getting any kind of drawn ball. Not saying that this is what you're doing, but you're most likely doing some combination of a weak grip or weak wrist angle. So the first thing I would do is I would get a stronger grip. A great way to do that is to work through drill number 1 of the 20-minute shallowing fix. Clay goes over a really easy protocol that actually makes that strong grip feel a lot more natural. A lot of times when I have people just put your hands on the grip more strong like this, it just feels very uncomfortable to them right out the gate because they're just going from what they did before to something that's very different, right? Whereas if you do the protocol, which I'll just go through the protocol real quick, basically what you do is you just take the club, you flip it upside down like it's an axe, right? And now I'm going to act like I'm chopping wood. And the reason why we do this is because it's a very powerful motion that most people have an intuitive sense of how to do, right? So I'm chopping wood. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn my elbows and point them toward where the target would be. I'm going to pretend like I'm chopping down a tree. Or I'm going to make that same motion. I'm just going to chop down a tree. Again, this is a very powerful motion that most people intuitively know how to do, right? So now I'm going to do that same thing, and I'm going to chop down where the golf ball is, right? Look at this motion that I'm making. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, I'm going to pause at where the golf ball would be. I'm going to loosen my grip, and then I'm going to square up the face, right? Because it was in that axe kind of position. Now I'm going to square up the face, re-grip the club. That's what your grip should be, right? Because that's the most natural impact position that you're going to have, right? And now when you go to address the ball, it's probably going to feel a little bit funny because you're probably used to having a weak grip and having your hands here. It's probably going to feel more comfortable to have your hands ahead of the golf ball, but that's going to make it a lot easier, for you to get into that position. So that's what I'd recommend doing. To get to that course, click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute shallowing fix. Go to that drill number 1, and I think it'll be really helpful for you to get that club face closed. Get those 10 hooks in a row. Really focus on just getting it to hook. Don't worry about getting it to start to the right yet until drill number 2. We got to get the face closed first before we can work on getting it to start to the right and curve to the left. So just work on drill number 1, get it to hook first, and then you can work on drill number 2. All right, so I'm just going to take a quick break here. I'll be right back, so bear with me. All right. Thanks for your patience. My nose was itching like crazy. I had to take care of that. All right, let's keep going. All right, so RC says, is there a correlation with more wrist radial deviation in shanking or holding club lower, dropping hands lower, should say? When I tried to lower my posture and lower my hands, I started shanking. Sorry, it's so confusing. So yeah, I mean, if you get closer to the golf ball and you don't change anything else, you don't change the release of the club, right? So let's say that you're currently like going like this, right? Currently, your pattern is to kind of stand up out of it and throw with your hands, right? And then you end up at contact with a center face contact, but you're kind of like this at impact, right? Well, if you change that, your posture to now be like this, and you don't change the release pattern, well, now I'm much closer to the golf ball, which means if I don't change the way I release the club, then I'm gonna probably hit the ball off the hosel, right? So if I'm staying in my posture more but releasing the club the same, I'm gonna throw that club out to the ball. So we have to get the release, we have to get the club releasing out in front. We can't come in here and then throw it still, because you're more than likely just gonna hit it off the hosel or chunk it. You know, it's one or the other. So I would say yes to the question. The short answer. So Willis says, if the target is north, should my club head strike the ball east to west, west to east, straight north, or does that depend on the shape of the shot you are attempting? Depends on the shape of the shot you are attempting. If you are trying to hit a dead straight shot, right, then your club, the way it's moving through contact, right, is going to be, now it's working on an arc, right? So if you imagine, we talked about the arc, the up and down arc. This is now kind of the arc. It's basically working on an inclined arc down to the ball, right? So my club is working to the right, to the right, to the right, to the right, turns the corner, then works to the left, right? Well, if you're trying to hit a dead straight shot, you essentially want the club to be, turning the corner at the golf ball, because that's going to be a path that's zero neutral right toward the target. And then you want the club face to be square and with a center face strike. And if you do that, the ball will go straight. The ball will go dead straight, barring any outside influence like wind or, something like that. Now, if I want to hit a draw, what needs to happen to hit a draw? What needs to happen is I need to have my club path into out, and I need to have my face be closed to that path, right? So that means that I need to be hitting the ball on, basically on the outward arc, right? And then I need that club face to be close to that, right? And then if I want to hit a fade, I need to have the club hitting it on, they need to have the club swinging to the left when it gets to the ball relative to the target. And then I need to have my club face open to that path to get it to curve back to the right, or curve to get it to fade. So yeah, it really just depends on the shot shape. So draw, we need to be for a right-handed golfer to hit a draw, the club path needs to be right of the target relative to the target, right? And then the club face needs to be a little bit close to the path. To hit a fade, we need to have the club path going left of the target, and then we need to have the face open to that path to get it to curve back. All right, so Graham C says, hi Q, when I practice my leg and body action with the club across my chest, I can nail the leg body action without any problem. When I try to hit the ball with the club in my hand, is much more difficult. Is there any way or drill to coordinate legs, body, and arms? Could you demonstrate, please? Thanks, and have a good weekend, Graham. So basically, the reason why you're not doing the same leg patterns with the club in your hand is because you're performing leg patterns that allow you to hit a functional golf shot. So I don't know what you're doing with the arms and the club, right? That's putting you in a bad position. So unfortunately, what I'm going to tell you is going to be a pretty, It's not necessarily going to be what the problem is, but it's going to be the most common thing. The only thing I can tell you is the most common thing without seeing your swing. Now, if I saw your swing, I could tell you exactly what was going on. We could do that through online lessons. I do offer online lessons. I don't think I have any spots available right now. Let me double check. Right, so I don't have any spots available right now, but if you want to join my waiting list, I could tell you exactly, what you're doing, and we could have a plan to get you in a good position. But most of the time, this is just an example of the most common thing that I see with people who don't move their lower body the way that they want to, is the club is in a bad position. So the club's coming down steep, right? So they're up at the top, the club comes down steep. Well, from this position, the club coming down steep, meaning this club's more vertical here. If I'm in this position and I were to really use my legs really well and rotate through the shot, I really have my body moving correctly and my legs and everything. Well, what would happen is I would just come way over the top and I would not hit a very good shot. I'm going to hit pulls, I'm going to hit slices, I'm going to hit pull hooks. And that's if I'm able to make good contact with the ball. Most likely, you're probably not going to be making good contact with the ball, right? So that's not going to be a very good pattern, right? So what most people will do from this position, right? They'll get here and then they'll stand up out of it, right? But look what happens to the club when I do that. When I do this, now that club can now work from the inside and I can hit a functional shot down the fairway. So basically what you need to do, what I'd recommend doing is working on the 20-minute shallowing fix to get the club in a shallow position. Because if I have the club in a shallow position, well, now I'm incentivized to rotate my body correctly or the way that we see tour players. But if I don't have that club in my arms, if I don't have a good arm structure or a good club, or if I'm not controlling the way that club comes down in the downswing correctly, then you're not going to move your body the way that we see a tour player, because you're not incentivized to do so. If you did, you'd probably hit a really bad shot. So that's why you don't do it. You have to be incentivized to use the legs properly. So, I think there is some benefit to working on the leg movements to kind of isolate it without the club in the hands and things like that. But, there is some benefit to that because it can help you to isolate what's going on and focus on what's going on. But it's really only helpful if you already have a good arm structure and everything. And maybe you're needing to move your legs in a certain way to get the club to work down correctly, right? Whereas you're moving your legs in a way that's actually going to make the club work down worse, which is going to make it almost impossible for you to do, because your brain's just not going to let you do it. Your brain knows this is going to be bad, if you do it, so you don't. So get the club shallowing out. That's going to be the best thing I can tell you. Outside of that, and that's going to be the 20-minute shallowing fix. So to get to that, click the instruction tab from the top and then drop down menu there, select the 20-minute shallowing fix. But outside of that, I would need to see your swing to know exactly what you need to do. All right, let's keep going. All right, so Anthony A says, I'm struggling with chunking. I'm working on the stop chunking and topping course. The first drill has me pushing a stick to the right and left with my back pockets, as Clay demonstrates in the video. What am I trying to accomplish in the drill? It seems counterintuitive since I expect to have some lateral movement in my hips in the downswing. I don't know if you're in the right course. I don't remember that from that course. Let me double check that. I believe in the first video, he's just trying to get you to be behind the ball, so that way you can move into the ball. I believe that's what's going on in the first one, but I could be wrong. I haven't looked at it in a while. And I think the second drill is like a step drill. Let me go in there. And stick drill. Yeah. So with the first drill, what you're trying to accomplish is basically being behind the golf ball. If we're not behind the golf ball, then we can't move in front of the golf ball, right? So basically what we see a lot of times with people who chunk the ball is they get out in front of the golf ball and then they have to back up out of it in the downswing, right? And then that's going to lead to chunking. So if you're not doing that, then you can just skip that one and go to the next one. But what the dot behind the ball drill does is it helps you to get here, so that way you can move into the good position in the downswing. All right, so Marty S says, I'm working. Excuse me. I don't know why my voice is so scratchy today. I'm working on the step drill. When I try to add the squat portion, I lose my balance to the left and right hand swing and backwards. What am I doing wrong? I'm guessing you're not rotating your body. So when you squat down, right, you want to rotate, push in the opposite direction of where you're falling to. So if you're falling off balance, push in the opposite direction of that, right? That's what's going to get you back in balance. So if I'm falling this way, I'm going to push in my feet back the other way to get me in balance. So if you're falling off, what did you say? I lose my balance to the left, right? So if you're kind of losing your balance this way, then you need to push yourself more to the right, right? To get you to be in better balance. So just push in the opposite direction of where you're falling off to. So Dick P says many golf instructors say that the shift to the left should start when the left arm is parallel on the backswing. What does that look like? Does it mean you start rotating left, or does it mean, or does it just mean the hips shift to the left? No, you don't start rotating until you start the downswing, right? So you can't go here and then start rotating and keep, right? So you're going up to the top. So basically, this is as far to my trail side as I'm going to be in this area of the swing. And then as I get up to the top, I'm actually moving into my lead side, right? So I'm here. This is as far to my trail side as I can be. And then I'm moving into my lead side, right? So if you think about like the pressures in the feet at address, I'm going to be about 50-50. As I get to about in this area here, I'm going to be as far to my trail side as I'm going to be. I'm going to be about 75-80% on my trail side as far as the pressure in my feet. And then as I get up to the top, I'm going to be essentially recentering that pressure. So my pressure is going to go back to 50-50 as I get up to the top, but I'm moving it to my lead side, right? So I'm taking some of that pressure that I built up into my trail side and then moving it into my lead side as I get up to the top. And about I get up to the top, I will have moved, enough to get to about a 50-50 position at the top. And then as I start down, that's going to increase, right? And as I come down to the ball, I'm going to have 75-80% pressure in my lead leg, right? So a really great drill to help you to work on this or to help you feel this is something called the step drill, right? So we have this in a lot of videos on the website. One in particular, probably the most popular one, is the sumo step drill from the 20-minute distance fix. It's from week 1 of the 20-minute distance fix. So to get to that, you can click the instruction tab, then 20-minute distance fix, then week 1, you'll see the sumo step drill. But basically what you do in that drill is you start with your feet together, right? You start the club going back, and then as the club basically is starting to go back, you step forward, right? So it's to help you to really exaggerate and get that feeling of your body shifting forward as you're completing your backswing, right? So give that drill a shot, and it can help you to get in those better positions. So Chase R says, how much forward press is okay at address? It definitely feels better to have forward press, some with a stronger grip, but I don't know if I can go too far. You can have as much forward press as you want, right? What I would say is, you can be like this if that makes you feel better, right? You can have as much forward press as you want. There's no rule about how much forward press you can have. You have as much forward press as you want. What I would say is that you just want to make sure that your body alignments are pretty square, right? So what you don't want to do is have so much forward press that it really opens up your chest, right? You wouldn't really want to start the swing from this position. Not that there's any kind of rule against that. It's just that it's hard to make a good backswing. It's hard to get the club moving in the proper way in the backswing from that position. Not that you can't do it. It's just that typically when I see people that have their body kind of opened up at address, right? Their shoulders are open, their hips are open, all this is open. They're going to tend to come over the top when they do that. It's usually what I see. So you can have the forward press, right, as much as you want, but I would just make sure that, you know, the knees, the hips, the shoulders, everything's nice and squared up. You don't want to have your body kind of out like this. You want to make sure that you got some good spine tilt with everything nice and squared up. And you can see if I do that, right, I can have a lot of forward press here, right? And that's really completely fine. Nothing wrong with that. If that's the most comfortable position for you to be in. So Dick P says, when you hit a draw, should you start with stance aiming right and club path aiming right, or just start from the inside out and use that to cure the ball? You can do either or. The golf ball doesn't know what your stance is. It only cares about how the club comes into the ball. So I can set up with my body. So let's say, not that I would recommend this, but I'm just to kind of prove a point, right? I can set up with my body open. Let's say that the target is the outlet on the wall here, right? So it's straight into the outlet here. I can set up with my body open and hit a draw from this position with my feet aiming left, right? I just have to swing from the inside, right? I have to swing to the right relative to the target, and then have my face closed to the path of my club. That's all I have to do to hit a draw. And I can do that with my body closed off, right? And I can do that with my feet square. So the alignment, you just take whatever alignment makes it the easiest for you to get the club to work the way you want in the downswing. Now, it's typically going to be easier to hit a draw if you aim your body to the left and swing kind of down your toe line. Typically, that's the easiest, but not for me personally. I naturally kind of swing from the inside a little bit. So I aim, my natural shot shape is a draw. I aim my feet at the target, and then I swing from in to out, right? Now, if I really wanted to bend one, I really wanted to get it to hook or something like that, I would aim my feet more out to the right, because that's going to get my path more out to the right. And then I would get my face more closed coming into contact, so that way it'll hook, right? But it really just depends on whatever makes it easier. So you use whatever alignment makes it easier for you to get the path to go where it needs to go. From there, there's no necessarily right or wrong way. You're going to see some players that aim their feet at the target like I do. You're going to see some players that have kind of a closed off to the target, because that helps them to hit a draw, to swing from the inside. So you do what works best for you. The ball doesn't care what your stance is. So Ted D says, can you share where the end of the grip points throughout the golf swing? I tend to close the club at impact. Maybe this will help. Can you share where the end of the grip points throughout the golf swing? It's not going to be the same for everybody. But I will say in the downswing, you're going to see a lot more similarities between players than you will see in the backswing. The backswing, you'll see a lot of different places where the club points, because there are going to be some players that have inside takeaways. They're going to have some players that have on-plane takeaways. You can have some players that have. So you're going to see some players that take it back like this, or like this. Well, the butt end of the club's pointing in a very different place in all of those, right? So I wouldn't even worry about. I would just take whatever path or whatever butt end of the club pointing wherever it needs to go to get it to be pointing in the good direction in the downswing, right? So in the downswing, ideally what we would have happen is as we're coming down, we would have the butt end of the club pointing outside the golf ball, right? And it would be pointing behind the golf ball. So I'm coming down, some lags being created here, right? So I'm getting the butt end of the club to be pointing behind the golf ball, and then it's going to be a little bit outside the golf ball. Now, there are some players that have it pointing more outside the golf ball than others. So like a Sergio Garcia, right? When he's coming down, his club is like this, right? That's a lot outside the golf ball, right? And then he kind of brings it down and slings it in there. And there are some players like a Phil Mickelson, like a Gary Woodland, that actually have it pointing a little bit inside the golf ball when they're coming down. And then it eventually points outside the golf ball as they get in this area, actually right of the target a little bit, and then into a good position. So basically ideally what we'd want is we'd want this club coming down And as we're coming down, this butt end of the club would be pointing a little bit outside the golf ball, and it would be behind the golf ball if you're looking for face on. And then as you're coming down, and when the butt end of the club is, basically when the club's parallel to the ground, I'd like to see the butt end of the club pointing a little bit right at your target if you're trying to shallow it out, right? And then comes up and around and hits the ball. All right, so Jerry B says, I've been doing the sump drill pretty faithfully. Sump drill. I don't know that one. And I'm getting way better contact and a naturally descending blow with balls on the turf, but I find myself out of sync with the driver, unable to get the ascending contact driver requires. Ideas. I don't know what the sump drill is. Sump drill. Sorry, I don't know the sump drill, but I will say sumo drill. Yeah, so basically you're doing the same thing. It's just that your ball position is going to be more forward, right? Your body may not go as forward, right? So we're going to be wider. So for a drive, here's the difference between driver and irons. The main thing is where you're contacting the ball in your arc is different, right? So for an iron, my stance is going to typically be a little bit narrower. Generally speaking, middle of the ankles, shoulder width apart, right? So if you were to draw a line from the outside of my shoulders, vertical lines going down, that should be going through kind of the middle of my ankles. Does not have to be exact, but generally speaking, that's what you're going to see, okay? Ball position, slightly forward of the middle of the stance, right? So I'm going to have a little shift in my trail side. I'm going to go up to the top. I'm going to basically keep my hips pretty centered, right, as I get up to the top, and then they're going to move forward a little bit as I come down to the ball. And as I come down, I'm going to be having a descending blow down to the golf ball. My club's working down in the arc, right? So it's more like this, right? The bottom of my arc is a little bit in front of the golf ball and below the ground, right? So now with the driver, I'm going to get a little bit wider. Generally speaking, inside of the ankles, about shoulder width apart. So that makes the stance 3-4 inches wider typically. The ball position is going to go forward, generally just outside of my lead shoulder here. So pretty much inside lead foot here, right? And again, I'm going to have a little bit of a pressure shift off the ball. And then I'm going to come into contact here and I'm going to be a little bit more angled away. And that allows me to hit up on the ball, right? So I'm shifting to my lead side, but then I'm pushing to rotate my body up and around. So iron impact is like this. I'm going to be more kind of straight up and down. My lead shoulder is going to be more on top of my ankle here. That's going to allow for a more descending blow. I'm going to have a narrower stance to make that easier, right? And I'm going to be wider with the driver. I'm going to be more angled away. I'm still shifting to my lead side, but I'm not going to go like this with my driver, right? That's going to promote a downward angle attack, right? I'm going to be a little bit more angled away as I come in with my driver. That's going to allow me, because of my wider stance and because I'm more angled away, that's going to allow me to have a more upward angle on the golf ball. So that's what I would be doing. You're probably just sliding your body too far forward and chopping down on the ball instead of, as soon as you get that pressure in that lead foot, push back and away from it. So that way your body can be more angled away as you're coming in to be able to create a upward angle attack on the ball. So Dick P says, what does it mean to dump the golf head into the ball to get more energy at impact? I've never really used that terminology, so I'm not really sure. But if I had to guess, I would say we're just kind of releasing the club head, right? So this is something that we talk about in the top speed golf system about, we want to create lag, but then we want to release that lag, right? So you can think of, if I had to guess, whoever instructor you heard that from, it's probably an interchangeable term for releasing the club, right? Dumping the energy is, I would equate that with releasing the energy, right? So I'm at the top of the swing here. I'm creating some lag as I'm coming down, like we talked about in the top speed golf system. And then from here, I'm going to release that lag into the ball. I'm going to end up releasing that club completely out in front. but I'm dumping that energy into the golf ball. If I didn't release it, right, then I wouldn't be able to transfer as much energy to the ball because it would look like that. I'd create that lag, but then I would just kind of hold on to it. I need to release it, right? It needs to be released. So we want lag, but we want to release that lag. Now, we don't want to release all of it at the golf ball because then we're going to tend to have no shaft lean, right? I want to have some lag at impact, meaning my hands are going to be in front of the golf ball at impact, right? I want to have that. That's going to allow me to transfer more energy to the golf ball because I'm de-lofting the club face, right? I'm hitting it with less loft. That's actually going to give me more energy. That's why your 8-iron goes farther than your pitching wedge, right? Because it has less loft. It's going to transfer more energy, and the ball is going to go farther. I don't want to dump everything into the ball because then I'm not going to have any shaft lean at impact. I'm going to hit the ball really high. If you have a lot of club head speed, you'll hit it very high, and it'll be hard to control. And then also, it won't go as far. So ideally, we would be releasing that club down into the ball. We don't want to hold on to it. We don't want to release too much. We want that club to be releasing about out front, like what Clay talks about in the Toss-Miguel system. Roughly 45 degrees out in front would be a good place to do it. So if you want to work on creating that lag and then releasing that lag, that's through the Toss-Miguel system. Specifically, the Toss-Miguel lag course is to help you to get the lag in the first place, right? To not cast. If you're throwing this out right away, you're basically dumping it out right away, and you don't have anything to dump into the ball or release into the ball. And then once we get that good lag, then we learn how to release it really well to get it to be whipping through contact, then dump the energy into the ball. That's going to be through the straight line release course, right? So if you want to check that out, click the instruction tab, then Toss-Miguel system, and work through the courses there. Let's keep going here. George says, I got fitted for irons and driver. How important is a putter fitting? Is it as detailed as irons and driver? It certainly can be. And I think it's important to get fitted for every club in your bag. I think driver is important. I think irons are important, obviously. But putter is very important. You want to have something. So when it comes to putting, what you want to make sure of is that you have something that allows you to see the right line, to hit the ball on the line that you're seeing, and to control your speed. That's really what it comes down to, right? So when you get fitted for a putter, you're really going to get fitted for something that allows you to be able to see the line the best, right? So, obviously different putters have different alignments, right? Some putters have lines on them. Some putters don't have lines on them. Through a good putter fitting process, they'll actually figure out if you're better at lining up a line that's pointing at the target, right? That's pointing at whatever the roll is you're trying to create. Or if you're better at lining up the face, which would be perpendicular to where you're doing. Some players are better at doing other things. If you look at Dustin Johnson does not have a line. He has a spider putter, right? He does not have a line on top of his putter. I think Jason Day, same thing, does not have a line on the top of his putter. Or at least, I don't know. I think he switched putters, right? But the old spider, the red spider putter they had for years, I don't believe it had a line on top of it, right? So those guys, they tested it and they found that they were better at lining up the face than they are lining up a line that's on the putter. So that's part of the fitting. A good fitting process is to figure out, okay, are you better at lining up this or that, right? Also, they'll find, for the length of putter is very, very important, right? If you're tall or short, right, you're going to have a shorter or longer putter. If you stand closer to the ball versus farther away from the ball, you're going to have a putter that, is the right length for that. You're also, the head makes a difference, right? The weighting in the head makes a big difference. So if you stand farther away and you have more of an arcing stroke, you're typically going to want to have more toe hang. So what that means is, actually I have an old school bullseye putter here, right? So you can see how the toe of this putter is hanging down. This would be basically as much of a toe hang putter as you can get. So this would be good for someone who has this putter really probably wouldn't be good for anybody because it's just obsolete as far as the technology and everything in it. But a putter with this kind of toe hang would be good for someone who has a very high arcing stroke. Now, I have another putter here that I don't know if I think it's a slight toe hang. Yep. So very, very slight toe hang there. Very, there's a few degrees of toe hang. So a face balanced putter would be one that where the club face is just pointing straight up to the sky here. Would be a very slight toe hang putter. So this would be good for someone who doesn't have, it has a very slightly arcing stroke, right? So someone who kind of brings it in a little bit to the inside, which I recommend everyone have some arc to their stroke because it's just how that's how the club naturally works around your body. But face balance putters can work well for those kind of strokes as well. But a lot of times they're going to get you on some sort of machine. Like when I've been fitted for putters, the last time I was fitted for a putter, I was on Sand Putt Lab, and basically what it is just it kind of measures your stroke, measures a lot of things about your stroke and the arc and things like that, and they can fit you for a putter based on the information that's in there. So I think it's very, very important. You think about it, the putter is one of the clubs in your bag that you hit the most. So it's definitely one of the most important. And it's very important to see the line and be able to make a stroke on that line and have something that fits what you're doing. So yeah, I definitely highly recommend that you get fit for a putter. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it that maybe people don't realize, but yeah, definitely recommend it. If anything, I would say it's just as important. I would say the driver is probably one of the most important. If I were to kind of rank the most important things, I would say probably driver number 1, putter number 2, and then irons and everything else number 3. But putter definitely very important. All right. We got maybe one more here from Troy. So Troy P asks, after contact, the arms and hands eventually overlaps when released. Should I intentionally turn my hands to this position at contact to help withdraw shots? Yeah, you certainly can. You can roll your arms over more. That can help you to get the club face more closed. So if you're struggling to get the face closed, then yeah, that's 100% fine to do because that can help you to get the club face more closed if you kind of roll the hands over more. That's basically what I say. People tell me, should I, have a square or a rolled release? So a square release would be where we're basically kind of holding the face. We're trying to hold the face square. There's not as much turnover of the club face. It kind of just stays all the way through. Your trail arms going to typically stay more underneath as you're releasing the club and even after contact. So examples of guys that have more of a square release would be like a Brooks Koepka, Dustin Johnson, right? Jordan Spieth. Those would be examples of players. And then there'd be like a rolled release where we're coming in and then the hands just kind of roll over more as you're coming through, right? So there's pros and cons, right? So the pros of a square release would be that it's possible that you could be more consistent. Now that is debatable because usually if you have more of a square release, you're going to have to, if it's not something that you're naturally doing, right, then it's something that you're going to be manipulating, which may be difficult, right? Which may make it less consistent if it's not a natural motion. Now, if you do it enough, it can become a natural motion, but like I said, it can be that's debatable, right? So the face is kind of staying square longer. The downside to it is that it's not going to be moving. You're going to lose a little bit of club head speed from doing that, right? Because you're not getting the rotation of the club face through contact as much, right? So if I have the club face going like this through contact versus this through contact, now the club is moving. I'm doing the same amount of speed with my body, but the face turning over adds a little bit. This is faster, or sorry, this adds something, right? Whereas this is if I just have it still square all the way through, you're not getting that rotation around the shaft that gives you a little extra, right? So that's the downside to it. And on the opposite end of that, if you have more of a rolled release, right, the downside to that is that your face is going from open to closed. There may be more of a timing element there, right? But if it's something that you naturally do, right, and this would be like the release of Tiger, Rory, most players have a rolled release, I would say. Um, but the upside is it's gonna have a little bit more speed. So what I would say is my best advice to most people would be to uh, do what you do naturally, and then only change it if it directly improves your impact, right, or improves your ball flight. So, for example, if you're someone who's really trying to get a square release, you're trying to get the Jordan Spieth release, right? But then you're slicing everything, you're leaving the club face open. Well, I would probably do more of a rolled release because it's going to be easier for you to get the club face closed. Now, on the other side of that, if you're someone who's snap hooking everything, the club face is getting too closed, right? It may benefit you to feel like you're having more of a hold off release through contact to help you to keep the face more open, right? Now, there's other ways to help you to control the face and things like that. But that's what, if you're trying to change that aspect of how you're releasing roll versus, more of a square release, then that would be kind of my advice. Do what you do naturally, and then only change it if you're needing to do something to get the face more open or closed. All right, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great weekend, and I will talk to y'all next time.